Welcome to this Upgrade Your Sound Product Showcase. My name is Steven Selman with Music and Arts. Really excited to spend some time talking about P. Mauriat Saxophones tonight. We've got a special guest joining us from the P. Mauriat Company, Mr. Craig Denny. He's here to discuss a couple of the key models, share some insights into really what makes these saxophones unique, and of course, answer any questions that you have. You can see the Q&A functionality down at the bottom of your screen. So at any point during the session, you can post a question. I'll be able to answer that for you, or obviously I'll pose it to Mr. Denny here. These saxophones are incredibly popular among students, teachers, and the gigging musician. And we're going to take a deep dive really on three particular models and hear from the expert on why P. Mauriat is a great choice for the advancing saxophone player looking to upgrade to a better instrument. Upgrading your horn obviously makes an incredible difference in the enjoyment of playing and really unlocks that true potential of what kind of musician that you can be. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Craig, and he's going to get us started, and we'll be bouncing some questions back and forth. Again, feel free to drop any questions that you have there in the Q&A functionality down at the bottom, and we'll pose it to the expert. So Craig, take it away.
Hey, Steve, thanks so much. I appreciate it, and appreciate the opportunity for Music and Arts to come and talk a little bit about P. Mauriat Saxophones. Before I get into the company and the horns, to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a musician first and foremost, and played professionally in Chicago for about a decade before I got into the other side of the business, and actually worked my way up through Selmer, and eventually was the director of marketing for saxophones for them. So I've got experience with a wide range of different saxophones, and about 10 years ago I was offered the opportunity to run P. Mauriat in North America, and so that's kind of where we are. So a little bit about P. Mauriat. It's a really interesting company because it's a young company. It was founded in 2003, and that's a very non-traditional start for a company, to be doing the kind of things that we've been able to do. It's been a lot of fun. So the P actually stands for Paul. It's Paul Mauriat was a band leader, a French band leader in the 60s and 70s. He had a kind of a hit. It was "Love Is Blue." If you'll check it out, you'll find it. And the reason the brand is called P. Mauriat is because the gentleman who owns the company and runs the company out of Taiwan, his name is Alex. He loves Paul Mauriat's music and approached the family and obtained rights to use the name, and that's where we are. So P. Mauriat is based in Taiwan. It's an all Taiwanese company that makes instruments in saxophones, clarinets, flutes, and trumpets. They only make professional and intermediate instruments. They don't make any student instruments. So they believe in, we believe that, working from the top down and integrating vertically all the way down through the line is really important, because all of the features that sit in a top level instrument, they still have the basics still have to be there at the very bottom too. So no matter what instrument you're playing, what saxophone you're playing, you're getting a base level of quality and consistency that is essential. I mean, you have to have it to be playing a better instrument. So it's the tagline for P. Mauriat is an interesting one. It's kind of dopey. It's "Go for the sound." And when I first heard it, I was like, "Oh, that's terrible." And as I started to live with it a little bit longer, I was like, "Actually, it's not terrible. It's kind of exactly who we are." "Go for the sound" is the tag, but it really encompasses what P. Mauriat is. We're a sound-focused company. And not just, what sound we get out of this horn or we get out of a trumpet or a clarinet or a flute. It's the sound that you make, the sound that the player makes, our horns are designed to get out of the way of the player, to make the experience as natural for a player as possible, to give them as much feedback, to give them as much what I call fun factor in what they do, so that they can just have fun making music. And that translates, from the top level pros that we have all the way down to somebody who's, playing for a year or two and needs to upgrade a little bit.
I love it, man. It's interesting. It's an interesting history for the company, but I've been in this business 15 years. I'll never forget standing in Illinois, Tasca, Illinois, with you at one of our Horns of Plenty shows. And it's the first time we had met, and I really started to hear about P. Mauriat. The reason that you were there is we had a lot of customers that were coming in and asking about the finishes, and it was really something that came at least to me out of nowhere. So from your perspective, when and how did these instruments really get that kind of attention, and why? Like, all of a sudden, it was that you had your industry standards, and then all of a sudden we've got these crazy finishes and some really incredibly sounding horns. Like, when did that happen? How did that kind of materialize? And what caused all that attention?
Well, I'll be honest, I first heard about Mauriat pretty early on. It was about 2006, 2007. I was with Conselmer, and as I was talking to I was still playing full time in Chicago too, and so I was hearing a little bit of buzz about this new brand. And with all new brands, you kind of be the flavor of the month, and there's this quick, hey, this is really cool, and then it goes away. The thing with Mauriat was it wasn't going away. It was 2 or 3 years of these are really cool. So one of the things that we do on this side of the business is competitive analysis. And so we look at everybody's stuff. And I got instruments on loan from all the big manufacturers and put Mauriat into the mix just to see how it would perform. And other than one other brand, it's on the way we scored it. It was the highest scoring, horn that we played, other than one. And for a new brand to have done that and to capture the imagination of the people that were playing them, because I wasn't a part of it. I was administering it, but it was other people that were playing and looking at them. It was pretty amazing. And so when I had an opportunity to come in and run the brand, I knew it was going to change distributors' hands, and that's not really germane to the story, but I was like, I want a shot at this because this brand's got a lot going for it, and the horns have a lot going for them. And I think that's really why. That's really why they got so much buzz early on, and honestly, it's been sustained throughout the last 10 years or so.
I love it. It's a great story, man. Really great story. So, in our audience, we have educators, we have students that have not upgraded their instrument and are trying to look for some guidance on what to get, why. We'll get into some of that here in just a little bit. But I guess my next question is, I want to give you a little bit of time to talk through some of the models. So, we're going to talk about 3 models tonight. In my experience in selecting instruments, I've helped families select thousands of instruments in my career. And, it seems to me that sometimes it becomes a belabored or an overly complicated process. And so,
Yes.
we've kind of selected the 3 models that we're going to talk about that you want to highlight. And then I'll bounce some other questions off of you. But, just quick overview, just a couple of minutes on each horn, and
Sure.
We'll talk about some of the differences and some of the other things that make those instruments unique.
Yeah. So what I have in my hand first is, when we picked horns that that obviously we feel super confident in, but we also picked horns that when I do a step-up event, particularly an upgrade your sound, it's like I know once we talk a little bit, when I talk with that parent, and I'm a parent, I've got 3 kids, all of whom who play a musical instrument, and when I talk with that parent and I then get and talk with their son or daughter, I can get them into one of three. And the first one that I have in my hands is the PMXA-67R DK. It's our most popular professional alto. Its counterpart is the 66R DK tenor, which is our most popular professional tenor. You can tell it's got a little bit different finish, and that's by design. It's not, we didn't just go, oh, hey, that looks really cool. We try to keep our finishes on the sonically viable side, meaning they add something or they do something to the instrument that's really, it'll set it apart from the other horns that may have a different finish, but it's the same horn. So this is the 67R DK. It's what we call a dark finish instrument. It means it does have lacquer on it, but it's designed to look almost antiqued. And the antiquing is an aesthetic thing. It just means that there's a little bit more that's put into the finish, and then it's got a matte lacquer over it, so it's completely protected, and which is really important for like a 13 to 18-year-old kid, because they've got enough hormones running through them to power New York City. What that translates to is oils in the hands, and oils break down lacquer, which is essentially just paint. So this is still lacquered. It's still completely protected. The biggest thing about a 67R though is the R stands for rolled. The tone holes on a 67R or a 66R are drawn and rolled, and that's very different than what happens on any other saxophone from any other maker or even any other horn in our line. Most are drawn out of the body tube, so there's like something that comes in it. It pulls the tone hole out, and when I say tone hole, I mean like that. That's a tone hole right there. So it pulls the tone hole out, and then there's like a thing that cuts it off. That's a straight tone hole. Well, on a roll tone hole, which is a very old traditional way of doing it, they actually roll the top of the tone hole over. There's a little thing that comes, it almost makes it look like a mushroom cap. But what it does is it takes all the resistance out of a horn and makes it super fun to play. So instead of a tone hole being just straight up and down, that tone hole then goes like this. So it's a very little thing. But when you have that happen from the top of the body tube all the way through the bow and through the bell, and you have all of these tone holes are all now drawn and rolled, it creates this thing that's totally different. So if you had a straight tone hole on this, like all the way through this horn, it would feel very different. The resistance would feel very different to a player, especially a younger player. And so for the same amount of air, they're getting more bang for their buck out of a 67R. And it makes it a very flexible instrument too.
Yeah, so, that's kind of the signature, right? I mean, that's one of the hallmarks, at least for P. Mauriat, and it's what I hear a lot about. Sure. So, one thing I want to say before we get into my next question on this horn particularly is this: whenever you described it, and probably how I would describe it, you hear the word professional, right? Mm-hmm. That sure. term. And, I think that for someone who doesn't actually play the instrument or doesn't know what exactly they're looking at, doesn't mean that you have to be a professional saxophone player to buy that instrument. Correct. I mean, it is absolutely a horn for the amateur player who wants really good equipment in their hands to play. But it's also obviously for that player that wants to upgrade from their student level instrument or intermediate level instrument. I felt like that was important to point out there. Rolled tone holes, definitely something that separates P. Mauriat from a lot of other brands. I hear a lot about that from customers. The question on the back end of this is, I see a lot of different finishes. I've seen the smoky black. I've seen clear lacquer. I've seen unlacquered. I've seen dark lacquer. I've seen, all of the above. Does that make any difference to the sound? Like, is that something that actually impacts what's coming out of the bell of the instrument, or is it just for looks and to be cool? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So It really depends on the amount of finishing that happens. So like this horn, actually, it's a raw brass instrument. Then there's, to get sort of like the darker tones in it, it actually has to have black lacquer that's applied to it, and then it's kind of rubbed off. And then there's a coat of matte lacquer that's put onto it. So like if you took this horn, but you had a cognac lacquer version or a gold lacquer version, it's still got lacquer on it. It will play different because it's got less finishing on it. And so some people think it's psychoacoustics. I'm a big believer that the type of finish that you put on the instrument does make a difference in the way it sounds. And the reason is this horn in raw brass will respond totally different than this horn in a lacquer of any kind. And it just depends on the pigment, because pigment weighs, like the cognac lacquer weighs, and it's by very little amounts, but it weighs more than a gold lacquer does. It's got different pigments in it.
Yeah, and that absolutely matters as a trumpet player. And man, trumpet players love to hear themselves talk, so I'll make it quick. But the lead pipe, I mean, we're talking 1/100ths of an inch difference in lead pipe and how they make that, and just that little bit actually makes a really big difference. It's a really good point. So from the finishes perspective, is there one that sounds, that's suited for jazz or suited for classical playing, more than the other? Or, and then the second piece of that is, what's the most popular? What do you see going out the door the most in the different finishes?
Sure. So traditionally classical, like really, I'll say it, really stuffy classical professors at the collegiate level will often prefer a gold lacquered instrument to anything else. But the finish is not indicative of what should be played on that horn. This instrument could sound absolutely beautiful in a classical setting. It could sound absolutely slamming in a jazz setting. That's more dependent on what mouthpiece you play on, the reeds, the type of reeds you play, and the way you play it. I'm a classically trained clarinetist, but all of my training on saxophone is in jazz and pop and commercial playing. So no one's asking me to play a bunch of classical music on a saxophone, but they do ask me to play jazz. And so when I play, it's the setup is really what makes that big difference. It's much less about the lacquer. So what was the second one part of the question? I forgot.
Yeah, no, the most, that's all right, man. So the most, what do you see going out the door the most? Yeah. What do you see?
Yeah. So for Mauriat in particular, the dark finish instruments, so the DK instruments are, regardless of whether it's a 67 or a System 76, those are the most popular finishes. It's just a good combination of aesthetic look, and the horn still really performs. Amongst our artists, it's mostly raw brass, and it's because of the amount of fun factor you get in a raw brass instrument. There's just more signal back to the player in a raw brass instrument. Gold lacquer actually kind of brings up the rear for us. Cognac lacquer is the second most popular. It goes dark finish, cognac lacquer, raw brass, gold lacquer, which in some of the other more traditional brands, they only have either clear lacquer or gold lacquer. So, and they might have some other finishes, but they don't really, it's not their go-to. So you'll find, in some other brands, it's definitely just gold lacquer and that's it.
Yeah, love it. And, again, back in the spirit of not overcomplicating this situation, Music and Art Stores has many of these horns on the wall. And if we don't have it in the wall in your local store, we absolutely can get it. So we'll help through that process. So we've talked a little bit about the professional level instrument.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a little bit more expensive. So there is a step down from there.
Yeah.
You mind talking a little bit about those horns, the other two horns that you have, and
Sure.
what are really the key differences? What should a parent be concerned with, and what should the the musician that's wanting to upgrade be concerned with?
Sure. So, what you said actually about professional instruments is really important. Just because it says professional on it does not mean that it's only played by professionals. Anyone who aspires to play better can play a pro horn. When we design these, it's not with the symphony musician in mind. It's with the player who wants to do as much as they want to do on the instrument. That's how we do it. So even though the 67R is a pro horn, and we technically don't call this is the LeBravo 200A. We technically don't call this a pro horn, but it's based on the same exact body tube as the 67. It just has straight tone holes, and it's put together a little different. Instead of all yellow brass construction on the 67, this actually has 80-20 bronze brass, and all that means is it's got a little bit more copper in the brass than 70-30 yellow brass. That's all it is. It's the ratio of copper to zinc, if you really want to nerd out. So this is actually made out of bronze brass. It's a little bit warmer in tone color because of the bronze brass. And to counteract that, we actually use a nickel silver neck. And nickel silver's like super zippy, and it's got a really positive signal right away. It helps to counteract how warm the bronze brass is. And then we use regular yellow brass keys for strength and durability. And this horn, clocks in at a little bit, actually a bit under where a 67R does. And it's a tremendous value because it's nearly all the same features, minus road tone holes. But you get different features. It's a different feature set. At this price point, most everything else is yellow brass. This gives you a little bit more color in the sound, a little bit more warmth, but it still gives you punch. And that's, for a developing player, so like 13 to 16 years old, 12 to 14 years old, this is a perfect horn because what I say about it often is it's almost like, when you first bowl, you go bowling, you put the bumpers in, you kind of got guardrail. You got the bumpers.
I've bowled all my life, and I still have bumpers in the things.
Exactly. Well, you're a trumpet player. It's okay.
Right.
So instead of having this wide open, really like the ability to do a ton of things with your embouchure on a 67, this kind of reins you in a little bit. But that's really good for a developing player because it teaches a younger player how to play the instrument properly, so that you can then expand your horizons with the pro horn. So that's kind of really the design concept behind a LeBravo 200A. This horn fights with the 67 RDK every year for top spot in our line in terms of the number of altos that we sell. It's and it dwarfs those two dwarf everything else in that intermediate and then professional line. So
I love it. Yeah. For the beginner saxophone who rented an instrument or got a student level instrument, it's a pretty significant jump from the horn to that. And from a price point perspective, it's perfect for the musicians that hadn't really figured out what they want to do for the rest of their musical career, growing into just loving the instrument and just need something better to play. It's a fantastic choice. Love that instrument.
Yeah.
What you have there?
So this is actually exclusive to Music and Arts, and this is called the 57GC, the PMSA-57GC. Now here's the thing. This is when I said earlier in the in the stream, I talked about vertical integration. That's just a fancy marketing term for it. We use a lot of the same things from top to bottom. So this horn is actually made in the same body tube as the 67R and the LeBravo, but it's a little bit, it's not stripped down. It's just we've taken the things that add a little bit more cost into those other instruments. We've taken them off this instrument, but the signal that you get from this body tube is nearly the same. The only thing that this 67 has that this doesn't is the roll tone holes. It's done in gold lacquer. It's still actually got tiger's eye pearls. These are synthetic. The abalone on the 67 is genuine, ethically sourced, obviously. But this horn, they all have the same Super 6 neck. They all respond phenomenally well. And actually, I played through all three. The 67 was my favorite because of the way, these aren't mine. These are what I got out of the our warehouse. But the 67 was my favorite out of how much it could do. But I'll be honest, the 57G was my second favorite of the three of these instruments because it rang. It had so much vibrance and it had so much presence to it, and it was like right there in terms of sound. It was really cool to play, and it was it's always a nice surprise because typically what happens is you get the pro horn and that obviously it's going to play really well, and then the intermediate plays, it still plays pretty well, and then you get to the entry level intermediate, it's like I don't know. This didn't do that. This really played really well. This is perfect for the student who has rented for a year or two, who loves playing, who's not ready. They or their parents are not ready to make that pro commitment yet, but they're looking for something that's like markedly better than what they're playing. This is a perfect instrument for it. And the 57s all come, whether you get it in the regular package, the jazz package, or the classical package, they all come with a complete upgraded accessory pack. So I've curated an accessory pack for each of those packages that focuses in on better equipment to accompany the saxophone too. And that's super important. I can't stress this enough. When you go to find your next instrument, make sure to have upgraded your mouthpiece already. Do that first. Do that like 6 months. If your student, if your son or daughter loves to play, the best thing you can get them is a better mouthpiece. Get them on good reeds, a better mouthpiece, and a better ligature as fast as possible, because that sets them up for success, and that sets them up for playing all of these instruments.
Yeah, I think the saying goes, the better the equipment closer to the source of the sound is always going to give you the desired result.
Without question.
With practice, of course.
Yes.
So a couple other things, we've talked about some really great horns. Again, it's not an overly complicated process to select an instrument. I mean, it's, you certainly don't want the equipment that your child or, even that you yourself are playing to hold you back. It's like driving a Ford Focus versus a Ferrari. I mean, it literally is that kind of different. So a couple other things that I want to talk about. I have some friends that play P. Mauriat, since they came onto the scene, I think you said 2006 is when they really started to ramp up. But, I've got some friends that absolutely love the horns. I know a few that play the soprano. I've got a friend that owns one of the Berries, but, these are really, really versatile horns. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, as a trumpet player myself, I really specialize in classical playing.
Sure.
Church gigs and church services and weddings and things like that. But there's times where I get called in for a big band gig or, go sit in and play some charts at a bar or something. So, can you speak a little bit to that? And, are these horns something that you can do that with, or are they good for both?
Yes. And they're very specific to not the different types of things that you can play, because as I said earlier, that is more dependent on mouthpiece. That's the difference between a Van Doren AL3 and like I play a Meyer, and granted it's sort of a vintage Meyer, but those are very different mouthpieces, and they will give you a very different sound. but you can get a classical sound on a Mauriat, and you can get a jazz sound, and you can get a pop sound. The thing that's really important to know about Mauriats is all of those genres have a modern version of their sound. And so whether it's classically or jazz playing or pop playing, there's a modern sound that has emerged especially in the US. And Mauriats are designed for that. It's not only to give, like a 67R, a lot of people will say, hey, that to me, that plays like a vintage whatever. And it actually is like a vintage, almost a Coworth or a Cuff. Those all had rolled, or a Con. And those all had drawn and rolled tone holes. And that's why it gets its comp, that's why it's its comp. But it has a modern twist on that big, bold sound. And so no matter what it is, whether it's the LeBravo or a 57GC, they all have a modern version. They're very flexible horns, but they all have a modern saxophone concept or sound concept behind them. So yes, I mean, that's by design. It's not, we didn't just happen across and go, oh, that's cool. So we actually designed that into the horns.
Yeah, I love it. Well, they're great instruments, man. Appreciate you talking about them. So the case is behind you. So obviously, this is a critical component of the package, right? You got to protect that investment, protect that instrument. I personally know a lot about those cases, but I know our audience probably doesn't know a lot.
Sure.
And then obviously too, the high school student, the ones that are upgrading and moving through their career, the cool factor is also a piece, right? So
absolutely
darn cool.
Yeah. So all of our pearl horns come in what we call the soft contoured case. It's not soft. The cordura is soft to the touch, but it's a synthetic shell case. It's super light. It's incredibly sturdy, and the Mauriat cases they do not skimp on pockets. I've done some product videos where I will actually, like, one of the I said in one of them, I'm like, it's got an obscene amount of pockets. Like, it's not socially acceptable how many pockets this thing has, because it does. It's got a pocket for here for all your stuff. It's got for your phone. It's got on the backside for your iPad, or and I mean, on the inside of the case, it's actually got a compartment underneath it, so for all extra stuff. I mean, and that's still being a shaped case. They typically don't have a lot. Shaped cases don't always have a ton of pockets. This one does, and it's great to carry everything. It's got it's backpackable. It's got a shoulder strap, and it does what it's supposed to do first and foremost, which is it protects the horn really
well. Yeah, that's priority number one. That is for sure. So what else comes in it? Does it come with a mouthpiece? You mentioned talking mouthpieces and upgrading that mouthpiece, but what does it come with? Any recommendations for those listening?
Sure. So Mauriats all come with a standard P Mauriat mouthpiece. It's good. Sorry, my dogs are.
It's okay.
Enjoying life too. They all come with a mouthpiece. They all come with a ligature and a P Mauriat reed. Every Mauriat comes as a full outfit. Meaning you could play that right out of, with what's in the case, you could play it right out of its box. Once you get to this level, you should probably be playing on something different in terms of a mouthpiece ligature. Although the P Mauriat reeds are phenomenal. They're really good. But I mentioned them before, a Van Doren AL3 or a Selmer C-Star is a perfect concert band mouthpiece to be playing all sorts of different things. Once you get into jazz bands, Myers, if it's a tenor, an auto link, something like that. We could do an entire 40 minutes on just that stuff. I could nerd out really hard, and I'd make somebody mad with who I didn't mention. So I won't do that. But what's important is once your student, or once you are you're set. You're like, I love playing. I want to get better at this. It's really important to get on a better set, better reeds, a better ligature, and most importantly, a better mouthpiece.
Sure. Yeah. And there are a couple of standards out there. Again, not to overcomplicate it. Our stores at Music and Arts, find your local music and art store. Many of our team members have education degrees or performance degrees, or they're all players. And you usually can find a saxophone player in one of our stores that could help guide, or at least a woodwind player to say, hey, these are the basics. And then secondarily to that, hopefully your beginning musician or your advancing musician is taking lessons. Even the folks out there that are not in grade school or taking music lessons, and their educator can help advise on that front from a, what do they prefer from a mouthpiece perspective, depending on what you're playing. Saxophone players I know all own, a bucket full of mouthpieces, metal and rubber, hard rubber, all of the above. So that's good stuff. Are there any other upgraded accessories that you'd recommend? I know that moisture is a big deal in woodwind instruments, but anything other than that that you think would be beneficial for the group?
Well, definitely a reed holder of some kind. It's super important to rotate your reeds, which means, this reed that I'm playing, I've got on my mouthpiece right now, I'm not playing that reed tomorrow. That's going back in my reed holder, and it's not going to get played tomorrow. I'm going to play the reed that is next in line. Rotating 3 to 4, or if you're playing seriously, 6 to 10 reeds on every instrument you play is super important. And that's not just a ploy. Look, it's not a ploy to get you to buy more reeds. What that does is it allows the reeds to settle back down. It's a natural fiber, so especially in cane reeds, it settles it back down. It allows that reed to settle back down into a regular humidity, which allows it to last longer. It's really to get your reeds to last longer. If you just play this reed until it literally just will walk off your mouthpiece by itself, it's not going to last very long. It will not. So rotating your reeds is super important. Reed cases are essential to that. The other thing I would say is neck strap, especially for younger players. It's important to get a strap that helps promote good posture. There's a lot of different neck straps out there that do that. Mauriat's all come with a P Mauriat neck strap, which is actually really good. It's got the leather, padded leather top to it. It slides very easily. It's a really great neck strap. This is the strap that I use. If I use a harness, I use something called the Sax Holder, and that is super cool, like space age holder, but it takes all the weight off your neck. And especially if you've got any back problems, or you're playing a tenor and you're a younger musician and you're playing tenor, or especially bari, a Sax Holder is essential. It'll change your life. It's really great.
Yeah, I love it, man. It's that gear. Well, you find it at Music and Arts. And Craig, I can't thank you enough, man, for coming on. Really great horns, very popular among educators, students, private teachers, professionals, all of the above, and a really great line of instruments, not just in alto horns, but got sopranos, tenors, and baries. So
yeah, the line does go through sopranino, through baries, actually bass sax even. So yeah,
wow,
it's a full line for sure.
Yep, I love it. Well, we can't thank you enough for being here. Really appreciate it. Couple of things I just wanted to touch on before we let everybody go for the evening. So, again, can't thank you enough for being here. I think everybody would agree that these horns are among the top instruments in the marketplace today. Excellent choice for really every level of player. During Upgrade Your Sound, during this Upgrade Your Sound showcase, we have a couple of special offers that I wanted to leave you with. So first of all, right here at the holidays, we offer 48-month financing. And so, to get that professional level saxophone, that certainly could help the situation. It's the first time that we've ever been able to offer 48-month financing. You can get that special financing at any music and art store, or we also offer that online at Financing Online with our partner Woodwind and Brasswind. After this is over, you will receive an email with the details for that, or you can just go directly to woodwindbrasswind.com. And then you may choose that financing, or we have just an outright purchase option, a cash deal. It's 15% off anything $199 or more that runs from now through Christmas. So you're good there. And again, most of our stores stock these horns as well as many others. So if you got any other questions, this showcase actually extends to in-store this weekend. Visit local music and art store, speak with an instrument expert. There you can learn more about these horns. And one thing that I'll plug selfishly before we get out of here, music lessons, private music instruction, music education, whatever you want to call it, is one of the single most important things that you can do in addition to upgrading your horn. I started playing in the 5th grade like many others, and a year and a half, 2 years in, my parents ponied up and we found a private trumpet teacher. And from that point on, it really changed the outlook on how much I cared about what I was doing. It kept me from getting frustrated. It's something that is absolutely a critical part to this. If this is something that they've got a passion for, or that you have a passion for, you can't replace music instruction and the joy that you can get out of it. So again, Craig, we appreciate you being here. Thanks to P. Mauriat. And we'll see you all very soon. Thank you and have a great evening.